What is up, you beautiful happy hustlers out there? Terry Jack here, and I hope you're having a awesome day. I mean it. Really, just seizing the very moment right here and right now and enjoying the happy within the hustle. And in this episode of the Happy Hustle podcast, we have on Cortney McDermott, who is a best-selling author, a TEDx speaker, and an expert mind and body coach at CourtInc.com, where she teaches how to use our minds and our bodies to create more of what we want and less of what we don't. And in this episode, we talk all about confidence, we talk about intuition, and we talk about how to align your mind and body so that you can actually get more of what you want and less of what you don't. And it's a very inspiring conversation with Cortney. I know you guys are going to dig it. And when you do, give her a shout out at Court Inc. on Instagram and or at Cortney McDermott on Instagram and at courtinc.com. Check out her website, pick up her new book. She's got a really awesome brand and I love her message. So you guys give that a check. And yeah, without further ado, let's dive into this episode of the Happy Hustle Podcast. And real quick, guys, I just want to give a huge shout out to this episode's sponsor, Nootopia, who is making the best nootropics in the world. And that is definitely my opinion, but I've tried a lot and these really work. I'm digging this power solution right now, which is really good for elevated mood and mental clarity. And it really helps with just concentration and positivity and just insane mental stamina that really makes you feel limitless. But the best part is they're natural. They've all been, third-party tested, and they have all sorts of great compounds that actually boost cognitive performance. And you guys get the hookup just for listening and watching this podcast at Nootopia. That's Nootopia.com/happy hustle. And then you can get the hookup for a whole world domination box, which has 9 proprietary formulas all in one box. So you guys can check out these different nootropics for different times, depending on what you got going on that day. So check it out, Nootopia.com/happy hustle. And best part, there is a money back guarantee, y'all. You got nothing to lose and everything to gain. So check those out. All right, now let's dive into this episode. All right, Cortney McDermott, welcome to the Happy Hustle Podcast. I am super excited to connect.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm super happy to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun one. I mean, you're a best-selling author, you're a TEDx speaker, and you're an expert mind and body coach where you help teach how to use our minds and bodies to get more of what we want and less of what we don't, which I'm all about that. But before we get into all that good stuff, Cortney, what is something interesting about yourself that not too many people know?
Something interesting about me that not a lot of folks know is that I am really into music. So I love to kind of jam on my own with pretty much any kind of instrument that you can put in front of me. I got out of it for a while, but I'm definitely getting back into it now. And I love piano, guitar, ukulele, singing.
Oh, nice.
That's sort of my favorite thing to do. And every once in a blue moon, I sing in public and do some stuff in public. So it's been a bit, but not a lot of people know that about me. So yeah.
Wow, interesting. I played the triangle a couple times, and maybe the harmonica a little bit, but that's about it. I have a guitar and I'm not good at all, but I do very much respect musicians, and it is a talent that I definitely want to get better at. So cool. That's awesome. Now let's dive in. I like to kick things off with a bang. So I know a lot of the happy hustlers out there, they're aspiring entrepreneurs. They're entrepreneurs. They want to really make a positive impact on this planet, but there's some things that hold us all back. And confidence is one of those things, being really confident in our own skin and with our own talents. We all have that compare and despair mindset, or that self-limiting belief. Who am I? Why would people listen to me? Or why would people want to resonate with my message? Talk to us a little bit about confidence and how to cultivate it.
Well, first of all, it's funny because I'm often surprised by how many people suffer from a crisis of confidence, and especially people you would assume definitely don't have that problem. So they've sort of made it, but they don't feel that confidence, which I actually define very differently than the way society does, because I think lots of times we get this idea of someone who's confident as being someone who's kind of maybe even a little bit overbearing, or kind of gets their way, or is the loudest person in the room, or the strongest in some regard. And really, confidence has nothing to do with that. And if you look at the root, the etymological root of the word confidence, it comes from confidere, which means with trust, or with full trust and reliance. And so the way I like to think about confidence is in that regard. In other words, the reliance, the trust in yourself, the trust in something greater, which actually we all have. Sometimes people say, well, I don't believe in something greater. I don't believe in something bigger. But actually, everyone does believe in something bigger, whether they're willing to admit it or not, because that something bigger is the thing that is taking care of all of those activities and circumstances and things that you don't have to be consciously aware of. In other words, like, for instance, it's the power that's, however you want to call it, that's beating your heart, that is conducting the trillions of biochemical reactions occurring in your body every second. It's that same power that, we can rely on more consistently to see much, much, much more beautiful results in our life. So I like to look at that aspect. I like to look at confidence through that lens, because I think we are looking at it through the wrong lens. I might actually be giving another TEDx talk about this in about a year from now.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, but it's such an important theme, because again, if we think that we're going to source that confidence from somewhere outside of us, we are off track. And I think that's one of the most important things, especially for an entrepreneur to sort of wrap their head around, because you can have all the best strategies, and you can be hustling, and you can be bustling, you can be doing all of that. And you could feel really empty, or you could feel like you don't have that sense that everything's going to work out. And if you feel that way, it's pretty, it takes its toll after a while. And so I think it's important to look at that. And you also brought up something else that's really important that, if you want, we can talk a little more about, which is this sin of comparison. But yeah, if you want to dive into that a little bit more, or if you prefer to go somewhere else, it's up to you.
No, I think it's a very important place to go. I mean, I talk to a lot of, fellow happy hustlers and aspiring, entrepreneurs who want to be happy hustlers. And it's something that holds us all back in some capacity. I think there's different levels in which it actually holds us back, but it's the sin of comparing ourselves to others. And I know that's one of the biggest hurdles for a lot of people to get over, in order to really create maybe some tips or tools or tactics that we can use to stop comparing and despairing.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think maybe some people listening might be wondering, okay, why did she use the word sin? And I kind of want to go back again to, I love words. I love languages. I speak different languages. I love etymology too, the root, understanding why we use certain words. And the real meaning of the word sin is to miss the mark. So it's not some sort of like puritanical idea of right and wrong. It's simply that you missed the mark. And there is no greater missing of the mark, in my opinion, than to compare yourself to others. And I actually write about this a little bit in my book. And I say it would be kind of the equivalent of a cell in the eye wanting to be a cell of the, nose, or the, you know what I mean? It's like, if that's what you're after, then you kind of miss the point again. And not only that, but if you look at us all as individual cells, right, and each one doing its work, if each one is doing its work, then the body's in a state of health. Whereas if a cell's looking somewhere else and saying, wait, what if I wish I could be a little bit like that cell, or maybe, if I were a little bit more, or I should just give up because that cell's way better than me, right? Like the body would be in a state of havoc. And actually that's sort of what you see if you look at the macrocosm, and the macrocosm, being in a state of disalignment is the result of the microcosm being in that state. Enough of the microcosms get to a state of health. If we look at something like critical mass, well, then the macrocosm can be in that state as well. And I actually created a whole another definition of the word sustainability based on this concept, which is like really about the ability to sustain yourself. So again, when you look at something like, because again, if we're looking at the macro and we're looking at the problems, it's going to be way more difficult for us to solve the problem than going within and actually tackling things on the micro level. And when you look at something like comparison in particular, which, you've talked a lot about in your work, and we hear a lot about, it's really hard to avoid that trap when you're constantly being exposed to input that's giving you the message that essentially you're not enough.
Yeah.
I remember reading a statistic over 20 years ago that said that the average American was exposed to 3,000 advertisements a day. Okay, that was over
Wow.
20 years ago, Carrie, over 20 years
Yeah.
ago. Today, that statistic is very different. Obviously, we're exposed to way more than that. Okay. And
Hmm.
if you look at using your phone and all this, and what are all those advertisements telling you? Essentially, they're telling you you're not smart enough, you're not thin enough, you're not whatever enough, you're just not enough, right? So
Yeah.
if we buy into that, right, and we buy that, we buy that Kool-Aid, we're in a heap of trouble, right? But so that's one of the things that, when you were talking about tips and things, I would say, one of the most important things that you can do to avoid that trap, and that you can do in general to kind of source that inner knowing that you do need to have the kind of confidence we were talking about, is to spend a little less time on, in those places, like places that don't feed your soul. So it might be, I don't know, for some people that might be Facebook. And right? You get that sensation when you're in a place
Yeah.
like that, online space, or even offline, where you feel like, I feel really yucky. Like people will get into their phones and they're checking social media or whatever. And after, I don't know, they lose track of time, right? So it's an hour later, they get out of there and they're thinking, and they just feel like crap, right? So that's the first indication that maybe that dosage isn't that great for you. And then I'm not saying that you have to go offline completely, although I sometimes do. I know you do as well.
Oh
I
yeah.
think it really feeds your soul. But I am saying, like, take it a little bit less at a time. And if you want to talk about, if you want to dive deeper into that, we could talk a little bit about the times that you ideally should be checking in. But generally speaking, I think avoiding some of that noise and
Mm.
tuning in is one of the best ways that you can start to diminish the amount of comparison that you're feeling.
Mm.
And also, as I said, source that kind of inner knowing that can lead you to where you need to go.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I mean, that's, I have the 10 alignments of being a happy hustler. And one of my favorites is the U in the acronym soul mapping, and which stands for unplug digitally. And when
Mm,
I'm unplugged digitally, that's when most of my great ideas actually happen, and that
totally.
inner knowing that you're talking about really shows its face, and I can cultivate it, and I can create the confidence, circling back, that I need to then push that idea to the, you know, to the world, and to share my inner gifts. And it's it's something where a lot of us don't give enough space to create
Oh,
that. We're always
mhm.
plugged in, we're connected to our devices, we're, connected to our laptops, or these notifications, or watching streaming shows and binging them. It's like, when you disconnect, then you can really connect to that inner knowing, and then you stop looking at other people's lives and you start focusing on your own, you know?
Totally. I talk about this so much in my book. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about your book. I mean, I know it really, it took off and it became a bestseller. And,
Mm.
I want to kind of dive into, what was the basis behind writing it, and, where people can even get it too.
Yeah, for sure. So the basis behind writing, I was at a very different place in my life at the time than where I am now, but I was definitely coming into this knowing that whatever I was told was it wasn't it.
Mm,
I joke about this in the book too, that I had sort of collected all the gold stars. I had all the accolades and the titles and,
yeah.
all of that kind of stuff. And I was working as an executive at Vanity Fair Corporation and, jet setting around the world, kind of like a very, very awesome job. I had the husband, the child, the Jimmy Two Heels. Like I kind of had the story, right? I had the story that, you
Hmm.
say, you look at that person and you say, that person's got it all, right?
Yeah.
And I actually coined the term miserably successful because I was
Mm,
miserably successful. Like I had all the things that are supposed to be the things, and I wasn't connected. I just wasn't
mm.
connected. And it was like, I'm like, who wrote this script anyway? Right. So when and can I rewrite it? Like, what does
Yeah.
that look like? And so that book outlines the beginnings of my process in outlining how I got from there to the life I live today, which is like really crazy. Like I challenged a lot of those sort of status quo, had to challenge every single structure in my life and kind of see like what's real,
Mm,
and really dig deep on that. And so that was the impetus for the book, and sort of like where I was at the time and what framed the TEDx talk. Like now, again, I'm in a totally different place, because you know what it's
you're in
like, right?
Italy
When
now,
you
right?
yeah, I was actually in Italy at the time. I moved to Italy. I can't even believe this. I moved to Italy 2 decades ago.
Oh,
So I
wow.
was like a child, and I had just fit, but I was very, very young, but I had also already finished like my post grad work in London. Like, I
Mm,
was, I was on this quote unquote fast track, but it wasn't making me very happy. And I
mm,
didn't even really realize, like, I got to a point where I wasn't happy, but I didn't really think I could do anything about that. And so, like I said, the
mm.
book is sort of was about that, was about my beginning to actually take some action, some guided action in the direction of
Yeah.
who I knew I was ultimately. I think, in a lot of different ways, even if I wasn't expressing that at the time. And, you also asked where it's available. It's available everywhere online. It's available in brick and mortar. We're actually moving into the third edition now. So I think it's available. I think that one's not going to be available for a few more weeks, but yeah. So it'll be a different cover. I'm going back to the black cover, and a few other things have kind of like been modified and tweaked, but yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's, say it's the title with the tagline
Yeah.
again.
So it's Change Starts Within You, which I couldn't
Mm.
believe that title actually hadn't been taken for a book yet. But
Yeah, I
anyway,
know.
change starts within you. And the preposition within is actually really important, because again, it highlights all that stuff that we were talking about before. In other words, like, how do you start to source that inner knowing, and how do you go within? And so that's the title. The subtitle is Unlock the Intuition to, or sorry, Unlock the Confidence to Lead with Intuition.
Mm,
Because again, like, I think a lot of people, and I love the fact that more and more men are admitting that intuition is like huge for
yeah.
them too. I feel like it was almost a little, it was a little bit not as common to hear that in people who identify as male. Like, it was a little bit like, intuition is this fluffy thing, but actually intuition is that same thing, that same knowing, and that same part of you that's like the unconscious part that is guiding so much of what's happening in and around you. So
Mm.
yeah, that's that on the book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, change starts within all of us. That's,
Mhm.
what we have to focus on is what we can control, which is our own actions, our own attitudes, our own effort,
Totally.
I think when people, they complain about, you know, their job, or they complain about the weather, or they complain about all these external variables, it's sad to me, because you can only control yourself, your
Totally.
attitude, your actions, and your reaction to those external variables. And you can
Right.
choose to be optimistic or pessimistic, and it's like the change in all of us is it's one single cell at a time, as you mentioned, to
Totally.
really truly get alignment on the macro level. You need to start on the micro level, and it's just starting small, little daily
Right.
disciplines, little daily habits. Talk to us a little bit about, you know trusting your intuition, and maybe a daily discipline that allows you to tap more into your intuition.
Okay, for sure. I love that. And thanks for asking. It's a really good question. And also, I love the way that Joseph Campbell refers to this. He actually coined the term blisscipline.
Hmm.
And I love to think about it that way, especially for entrepreneurs who are listening, because I know so many entrepreneurs, they don't necessarily want to have the structure, right? They sort of got away from the structure, and
Yeah.
they're like, screw the structure, right? And I don't want to have to, whatever, I want to be creative. And yeah, there's a lot to be said for being able to live a life like that. Like, I live a life where, yeah, just like, I have time freedom, I have decision freedom, like, I have freedom, and that's
Yeah.
one of my highest values, is like freedom.
Hmm.
And so bliss, but it's surprising, because blisscipline is actually, it creates that freedom. And I think a
It
lot of people
does.
miss that point, right? It's like, you putting in that consistent effort leads to a sense of freedom. And
Yep.
I think that's also because it's the rightful use of the thing we call free will.
Mm.
It's the one thing that we have control over. you know? And it's funny because we think we control all these things. And I think one of the biggest highlights of the pandemic, if you will, was like, you don't control anything. And if you thought you controlled anything before this, now you really know, oh, you know, like, it's almost like we had to get smacked around quite a bit to see like, you don't control it. You don't control very much at all, but you do control exactly what you just said. You do control your free will, but it is really hard to go from a place of, and I kind of want to still pause on this point because I know you came from a pretty adverse background. I didn't have things quite so easy as well either, you know, growing up, and lots of difficulties there, lots of traumas. And I normally don't talk about that, going back to your question at the beginning. So a lot of people don't necessarily know that, but they look at someone like you or someone like me and they think, oh, well, you know, it's easy for you to talk about it. Like, you're always happy. Well, we weren't always happy. We had our struggles. We weren't, and you know, even now, I'm sure you're not always happy. I'm not always happy, but the line starts to move, and it starts to move precisely through that discipline and the dedication and the commitment to the greater you that you know is there. And it's just like, it's begging to be expressed. And the less you show up for that discipline, the less it trusts you it can trust to come forward. And you know, the way you can think about that is a little bit like you know, it's an awful way maybe to think about it, but like an abused animal, right? And you know, you could even think of like an abused child. It's a horrible way to think about it, but it's very similar to what happens with that inner part of you that knows, you know, that part that we can identify as intuition. And of course we could get into the science of intuition and take that elsewhere in terms of like what is actually happening. But just to forget about that for a second and talk about like this unconscious part of you that does guide. It's like this internal guiding system. What happens is if it feels a little bit like, you know, you push it down, you don't acknowledge it, you don't give it space, you don't, you know, you hide away from that part of yourself, or you even abuse that part of yourself, you know, what happens is it gets quieter and quieter. And so when you actually start to say, I'm here, it's as simple as that. Like, I'm here, I'm listening, I'm sorry, even maybe, you know, sometimes that's necessary. Then what happens is that injured part, or that part that's been afraid to come out. And again, this could go with more or less traumatic experiences because we've all had some form of this anyway. But it's like, the more you actually just start to show up for it, like, people think you have to do all these techniques and tactics and everything else. And in reality, really, it's just saying like, hey, I'm here, and taking a few minutes every day just to be like, hey, I'm here. Like, I really want to show up differently. You know, what does that look like? And maybe even taking that time, you know, since you asked about disciplines and things, I think, you know, there's some crucial times in your day, right? And we know this, and it's when ultimately it's those times that correspond to when your brain wave frequencies are open enough, okay, and programmable enough for you to actually make some change in your life, right? So a lot of people start out their days on their phone. This is one of the things that, you know, again, I talk about in my book, I talk about in my talks, you know, when I give talks around the world, is like, hey, if you just started your day off with yourself for a few minutes and just tuned in, like, and just said, hey, I'm here, what's up? You know, to that part of you, like, literally your life would transform over a very short period of time because you are just showing up for yourself. Okay. Instead, we, you know, we're coming out of these really powerful brainwave frequencies, or we're going into them, right? Because, you know, you're going, for instance, and when you're waking up, you're coming out of delta, you're going in theta, right? You're coming out of these, like I said, very programmable states. So what you're feeding your mind at that time, or what you're deciding to do at that time, is crucial. And it's the same thing right before you go to bed. And we hear a lot about this, but people get stuck in that, like, I don't know, it's a FOMO thing, right? Like, I'm going to miss out, or, you know, whatever I need to see. But just imagine the effects on your brain when you're waking up to see like something that is maybe somewhat disturbing for you, or something that doesn't feed your soul in some great way. Like, you know, it's huge. It's a huge change. And I would say even just some sort of breathing practice, because most people, you know, just the other thing I would add, and there's so many things that we could talk about, but I think some sort of breathing practice that really helps you. And there are so many different ways. It's not really about the one that you use. It's about the commitment to show up for it and to say, hey, you know, like, this is important, because most people are just not breathing correctly. And most people are in a chronic state of apnea. So like, they're really not, they're holding their breath, right? And especially when we've got crises like the ones we've been going through, right? People, and you're wearing this mask and like all these things. And the fact is, if your breathing is restricted, that flow, that energetic flow, that can move through you is also being restricted. So it's just those two things, and they're very simple, and there's no, crazy amount of work behind any of them. Those little disciplines of just like tuning into your breath, tuning into that knowing, and taking those moments that are just for you, those will
Mhm.
already start to create massive shifts for
Yeah,
people.
I so agree. I mean, just getting up in the morning, journaling,
Oh
taking
yeah.
a moment for gratitude and maybe reading something inspirational or educational,
Hmm.
disconnected from your devices. I talk about in my book coming out in November, um, really the first 60 minutes of your morning and before you
Hmm.
go to bed, just being completely unplugged, and
Totally.
I don't do it perfectly. I don't claim to,
Hmm. Hmm.
sometimes I'll watch a show late, and like I'll just get up and I'll be like, oh, like I got a call from my mom. I wonder what, is she okay?
Yeah.
Something like, and it breaks my pattern, but I know when I tap into that creative state and really just allow myself to listen to my intuition and whatever it's telling
Totally.
me. And then just, I think gratitude is such a powerful tool as well.
Mm.
I know you're big into gratitude,
Oh yeah.
and it's just a really great practice to really start to align yourself, your minds, your body, what you want, what you don't want. And one thing I think about too is people who focus on the
Hmm.
problem expands. People who
Totally.
focus on the solution manifests. And that's like,
Absolutely.
I know it sounds woo woo, but it is what happens, on a psychological level or on an unconscious level. And so if you're waking up and you're, stressing about your day or your problems, well, they're just going to become more evident, and, you know, they're going to unfortunately burden you. But if you focus on the solution or find gratitude for whatever is, you know,
Mm.
available in that moment, hey, you look down, you got all 5 fingers on each hand. Wow, I'm grateful. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
starts so small, but then you can expand it so big. And so and again, Courtney and we didn't always have these mindsets, but it's something you cultivate, and so I think
Right.
that's how you really do become a happy hustler is you just start with the bliss disciplines. I love that word. I'm all about creating blissful balance.
Yeah.
And speaking of blissful balance, I'm wondering, what does your work-life balance look like right now? What's the
Mm.
typical day?
Okay. Well, first I want to say you're right on about the gratitude thing. And anyone listening, that's another thing. Like the more you can just feel it, like really, really feel it, tune into
Mm-hmm.
getting to that place. Like you won't get to a place where you don't even know why you're so grateful. You're just so grateful, and
Oh
you're like
yeah.
spinning out on gratitude, and it's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
It's like the greatest high ever. Sir John
Oh
Templeton,
yeah.
who was
I was there
one of the
yesterday.
I know it's amazing, right? It's incredible. Like sometimes I just wake up, I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
God, I'm so great. Like, and it's not about a specific thing, but the more you do, like you're committed to this and seeing, wow, how much there is to be grateful for. My God, even what will happen if you do that is you will start to find so much gratitude in things that seem averse, problems and things. You will get to a point where you're just like, you will feel gratitude for those things that are really creating a challenge for you, because you'll just be like, oh my God. And I know that sounds trippy and all that, but it is the reality of what happens. And almost everyone I've studied on wealth accumulations, I know this is big in your work too, like they
Mm-hmm.
all point to gratitude, a sense of gratitude, and just
Yeah,
you just feeling into that. And how important it is. So I wanted to say something about that because I agree with you. I think that's one of the
for
key,
sure.
absolute key things. So work-life balance, getting back to your question, I struggle with the word balance. Okay, you know me, by now, just within these few minutes of our talk, is like the word itself, I think, is a bit, it's a bit misleading.
Mm.
It's a bit misleading because what happens is, and I see this all the time, and I know, we're talking maybe primarily to men in this podcast, but I see it especially with women where you feel like you've got to cover all the bases and you got to make sure that you're like excellent at this and excellent at that and excellent at this other thing all at the same time, right? And that like no part. And the reality of the situation is quite different. Like if you look at nature, nature is never really in a state of balance. It's in a state of harmony. And I know that that might seem like, okay, maybe it's word picking, but actually it's a very important distinction, because if you're thinking like balance, like keeping everything on this scale that's not supposed to tip at all, right? It does tip. The reality of life is that it does tip. There are going to be times when you're offline for days at a time, and time when you're going to be really hustling, right? When you're there online and you're like showing up for everybody and everything, and you're running at it, but then you give yourself that time, right, to recoup. And so I think it's really important that people ease up on themselves in this idea of like work-life balance, because it's such a, I actually wanted to write, I'm going to write a blog post on that. I've got a blog post in my head on this, on work-life balance, because I feel like it is kind of a myth. And the more you sort of buy into that myth of like, oh, I've got to be perfectly balanced between my work and my life, like it doesn't really work that way in my experience. And when you try to make that happen, again, that's you trying to control like things rather than letting them flow through you. And it's a very different life reality when you're trying to, get all of the, just like I said, cover all the bases or make sure that it's all balanced. So for me, harmony looks a lot like, in music, right? Like I'm gonna have the quiet. I need the silence, right? There's an excellent, Buddhist, I think it's Buddhist quote. So it's this idea that it's the space between the bars that holds the tiger, and it's the silence between the notes that makes the music. We wouldn't have that music without that silence. We wouldn't have like that. You see, it's exactly pointing back to what you were talking about earlier, the importance of creating space. Space. Like we are mostly space. I find that in and of itself really a phenomenal reality. And again, we could go deep into the science on that, which is fun and interesting, maybe if you want. But what is important about it is to realize, like, give yourself that space. And the more space you give yourself, the more you're going to realize, like, these are the few things that I have to get done today. Like today, I did a lot of different things, like loads of different things, and they weren't all work related, but they sort of fit together in this, kind of really beautiful harmony. And a lot of it was like, I rested, I meditated, I did some breath work, like I read for a bit, I went out, like I'll go out for a run, or I'll play some guitar, or, whatever it is. And then I'll go back to this work. And it's like this harmony is looking for the harmony. And the harmony is about like, it's funny because I was working with a musician once, and he said something to the effect of, if it sounds good, it is good. If it sounds good, it is good. And I think paying attention, like, even when someone else tells you, do these 5 practices, does that really, is that you? Are those yours? Right? Like there are certain universal truths, I think, that hold. But when it comes to, again, finding what works for you, like it's really important to start to tune in again and say, like, oh, okay, oh, that feels like harmony. Like that's a good pitch. I like that, and maybe you don't even know completely how to play the instrument yet, but you're like, whatever that thing is, it sounds good. And you don't need to necessarily be a pro to create something really beautiful. Like you don't, I think that gets mixed up sometimes, but you do need to be committed to yourself and to what's true for you. That you do need, and that does create that kind of harmony in your life, in your work, in everything. Like, I don't know, I feel you said it at the beginning. I don't know if you said it on this podcast, but when we talked, you're like, I'll feel so blessed, right? Like I feel so blessed, right? That's what it's like. It's like, oh, that's me. That's my formula. Like it, you know what I mean? We search outside a lot, and there are definitely some things that can remind us of what's true for us, for sure. And I think that's why podcasts like yours are fantastic, because it's like, oh, he's reminding me of something that I know deep within me to be true. Otherwise, the people who are listening right now, those are people who they know that deep within them that they have that truth, and they're being reminded of it through you. And that's just this most glorious gift, right? That you've created this platform to remind people of what they know. And actually, that's what education means, right? It's to educe, it's to bring forth the genius that lives in others. And that's a real beautiful thing that you're doing there. So, okay.
Well,
I kind of answered that in a roundabout way.
Did.
But yeah.
No, well, I appreciate that, and I receive it, and thank you. And you're also doing very powerful, impactful work, reminding others to, change from within. And, one thing that I really focus on is prioritizing each area of my life with equal importance. And I know some people, this might feel, oh my gosh, it's, It's a shock. You mean you give this podcast interview the same priority as your date night, the same priority as your workout, the same priority as going fly fishing? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's how I achieve that blissful balance for me. And for me, balance isn't a finite destination. It's a never-ending journey. So I don't look at it as a destination. It's not the pendulum perfectly balanced, or this scale that's just a little bit here, a little bit there. It's
Right.
prioritizing each area of my life with equal importance, and recognizing that when I fill my cup up with these different areas of life that really give me joy, then I can give from my overflow to others, and
Totally.
bask in that. I think, again, too many people, they really focus on giving so much to others, but they're empty inside. And so
Mhm.
you really have to start again changing from within. So this has been just enlightening, and I hope everyone listening and watching really takes these words to heart, and focuses on what are those little disciplines that they can do today to start to change from within, and really focus on what fills your cup.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's been great. Now, Courtney, I do want to ask you some happy hustle hack questions. Now, these, I
Okay.
deem them happy hustle hacks, and I like to ask them in a couple different disciplines. One being health,
Okay.
because I know health is a priority for you. Without your health, you
Totally.
really can't happy hustle in any area.
Totally.
So I'm curious, do you have a happy hustle hack, a tip, a tool, a tactic, something that you could share with the happy hustlers out there in regards to health?
Oh, okay. All right. I'm going to share something that actually probably doesn't pop up very often, because we think of health as like, get exercise, get outside, do some breath work, like all these different things, right? But I don't know if you've ever heard of the blue zones.
Yeah.
So the blue zones, right? There are these
Mm-hmm.
places in the earth where people have the greatest life longevity. The longevity of their life is
Mm-hmm.
the greatest,
There's
and
one in
they
Italy.
also seem to. There's one in Italy, and they
Yeah.
seem to be the happiest, right? And what they found was like the number one thing was community. It's like,
Mm.
who are you surrounding yourself by, and do you have those strong ties, and do you have a strong community?
Yeah.
And so it's funny how important that piece is to health. Like, I think that, and how you are talking to yourself, how you
Mm.
are actually talking to yourself, like, just start to pay attention. Are you loving up your body? Like, are you loving, this physical vessel that is taking all this magnificent hardware? Like, are you loving that hardware, right? Like, is your software loving up on your hardware, and vice versa? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's this virtuous loop. And so those two things, I think, are kind of the key hacks
Yeah.
that I would say, like, just notice. And sometimes people say, oh, but the people surrounding me, right? Like, I don't have that supportive community or whatever. Well, tune into more podcasts like this. You don't have to necessarily have like the great, and I mean, I definitely went through periods in my life where I didn't have as many people as I do now, who just such loving, supportive people in my life, right? Like, but now it's like, I sometimes joke that, like, if I had to bury a dead body, there's at least 10 people I could call and be like, hey, I need your help, and they would, no questions asked, right? Like,
Love
it's a
it.
really strong, beautiful international community, and like just really loving souls. And I think you can cultivate that. You can start to create that at any time. At any time, some of my closest people are people I've met over just the last few years of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a
So
great point. Community. It
yeah.
Yeah, that's and you don't hear that very often, but it really is.
Mhm.
As they say, you're the sum of your five closest relationships you spend the most time with. You're either rounding up
Totally.
or you're rounding down. You're either hanging out with energy vampires, or you're hanging out with
Totally.
people
Yeah.
who fill you up with energy. So it's just
Yeah.
important to take stock in your inner circle. Let's
Totally.
talk about money. Money, it's a tool,
Okay.
it's a
Love it. I
frequency.
love
It's
money. Let's talk
Yeah,
about
me too. I
it.
love money too. I think it really shows the world more of who you truly are, and
hmm
I'm
hmm
curious, do you have, a happy hustle hack in regards to money, maybe something you do to save or invest or spend wisely or accrue, money more, that you can share?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, money is very much an energy. I mean, you just kind of nailed it with that, in the sense that you have to take a look at how you're what is happening with you in terms of, if you were to think of it as a relationship, right, that you have with this energy, right?
Mm,
Uh, what does that relationship actually really look like? Like, are you invested in that relationship? Are you taking time to really connect with that energy? You know, because a lot of people say they want more money, but then they don't actually necessarily spend any time looking at what wealth accumulation, is. They don't even necessarily understand the difference between, wealth and money, right? Because it's not necessarily about a dollar amount. Like, people put this idea of a dollar amount. Well, that dollar amount probably, on its own isn't going to bring you this great happiness and contentment, right? It's
mm,
really, what does money represent for you, and how are you relating to money? So,
yeah.
again, people say, they say things, just start to pay attention. How are you dialoguing with money? Like, some people say, oh, there's not enough to go around, or they say things like, oh, I don't really need that. I don't really need that much money. Okay. Like, if you had a friend who said, I don't really need you, I don't, you're okay, but like, I don't really need that much. You like, you know what I'm saying? The relationship wouldn't thrive. If
Yeah.
instead that friend was like, hey man, you're really cool. Like, how can I learn more about you? Tell me more about you. Let me learn more about you. Right.
Yeah.
And then that leads to a lot of different things that, could be investment strategies, could be savings, could be all those things. But again, the strategy is way less important than the state and the stories you got going on around that
Yeah.
particular type of energy, which again is a currency. Like, the root of the word, right? Currency, it's corrente, it's flow, right? So if you're in some way kind of blocking that through either your mindset around it, your, your abundance set, like, how abundant can I be here? Your experiences, like, for instance, I like to spend money on experiences. It's like, I don't necessarily need a lot of really great material. I mean, I have no problem with that, but I'm just saying, like, it's not necessarily what I derive the most happiness out of, but I love using money for other things, giving back, or being able to offer a great experience to someone, or even to myself, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
how do you start to interact with that currency in a way that feels better and better to you all the time? And that's how you build a stronger relationship, is you're making those micro investments. And that brings us back to the discipline thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. It's that mindset around money. It's not necessarily one strategy or investment, tool or another. It's more important to really get clear on what's the dialogue that you're telling yourself about money. Are you abundant or are you scarce? And operating from that scarcity really creates more scarcity, and you'll never
Totally.
save your way to wealth. You will invest your way or build your way to wealth, by having a
Mhm.
business, or by investing in assets that appreciate, not
Mm,
depreciate. Like, it's really, for me, it's just been such a blessing to look at the abundance that I have in life. And there's always more. We can always get more, but when you get caught
mhm.
up in that more game, um, it's
Yeah,
exhausting and it's never ending. So just being abundant, feeling abundant and grateful for whatever you have. Again, it comes back to gratitude, for me, but
yeah,
the vision and the dialogue around money is huge. So I love that you mentioned that.
yeah.
Now let's talk about spirituality, and I know
Okay.
you're big into meditating and breath work. And, for me, spirituality is more of believing in a higher power, believing in, something bigger than myself, a
Mhm,
greater good, and
mhm.
having faith and morals.
Totally.
What is spirituality, necessarily mean to you, and what's a happy hustle hack around it that maybe you can share?
Mm. So, wow, I love that so much. And I think, we tend to kind of do this with things, right? Is like, we put it in its own category, like spirituality is this thing apart, right? Well, spirituality is everything, really. I mean, it's infused, it it's when you have that kind of faith, right? You have that in everything. You can have that.
Mm,
It will permeate and penetrate into your wealth accumulation, into your relationships, into everything. And here's the thing: it's what I said. I don't know, I guess about 20, 30 minutes ago, which is this fact that you have that faith. You have that faith in 99.9999999% of what's happening around, like around and within you. You're not sitting there thinking, okay, I've got to be the one to conduct these trillions of biochemical reactions, or, I have to be the one to pump the blood to my different organs. You're not thinking about that. You put your faith, if you're in a state of, relative health, you put your faith in that power that's conducting that. Now, you can call that power whatever you want. Really, it's irrelevant how you want to call it. But we do know that there is this other mind. Let's put it that way. There's another mind that is constantly at work for you, and it is absolutely working for you. And if you will go with it instead of against it, your life can be magnificent. Your life is magnificent, when
Yeah.
you let go of like that need to, and I think the greatest thing that you can probably do is not do something to try to get to it. It's really just to be. And you said something gorgeous earlier. You said that everything you do, you try to give it the equal amount of import. Like, that's faith, right? That is that this moment right now, what's in front of me is the most important thing that's in front of me. And like, otherwise it wouldn't be in front of me right now. And that is this ultimate faith piece. It's this ultimate, like, trusting that that's what it is. Faith is trust, right? It's like trusting. This is what I'm supposed to do right now. This is the person in front of me. This is what I'm listening to. This is, whatever that is. And that is the greatest non-hack that one can apply to living their life fully. And whether you want to call that, and if you struggle with the word spiritual, forget the word spiritual, forget the word, faith, even if you struggle, or God, or, whatever. It's not about the word. It's about connecting to that knowing that is that same knowing that you're going to be, you're going to be okay. And instead, if we connect to that, like, I'm not going to be okay. And, I'm like in fear and all this other thing, you deplete your resources, and your life energy just gets sucked out, because you're fighting what is actually true, which is that, there is this power that is looking out for you.
Yep. Yeah. So well said. I love that. And just being present in the moment is what it's all about. Cause, one of my mentors, Dan Millman, always says, there's no past, there's no future, there's only the eternal present, and it's a little bit trippy to think about, but it's what we got right now, this moment, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. None of us know. So you might as well live it up, happy hustle, a life we love in the process, right? Now, this has been amazing, Cortney. I just want to, really take a moment to acknowledge you and just really thank you for sharing your love, your light, your wisdom with the Happy Hustlers. This has been awesome. So thank you. Now, I do like to ask the rapid fire questions. And this is basically where I just ask you random things and you answer honestly, first thing that comes to mind. Okay. And we go from there. Are you ready?
Sounds good. I'm ready.
All right. Favorite movie, go.
Oh God, favorite movie. Whenever they ask me favorite movies, oh gosh, this is so hard. Favorite movie.
What came to mind?
Oh my God. No movie. I'm the worst at favorite stuff, because literally I'm constantly in that state of flow. Like, I don't know. It's so hard for me to pinpoint, even like favorite color. I had a bunch of kids ask me this the other day. I was like, can I say white, which is all the colors put together? Like, I don't know.
What's the last movie you watched?
The last movie. See, even here. Okay. The last movie I watched, oh man, that I liked. The funniest thing I watched, the last movie I watched was Titanic, because my daughter is like in love with Titanic right now. And
it's a good one.
You can believe this, we had to watch it like 5 times when we were in the US. She wanted, it was super long. It was like
it's a lot. It's a lot.
So I love Titanic, but I wouldn't watch it 5 times again. There you go.
There you go. Favorite book?
Oh, I have so many favorite books. Can I say more like the books that I'm reading right now that have really touched me, that are really touching me? The Holographic Universe is one of my all-time favorite books. That dude's genius. His work explains so many things that, you may have lived. And even when you were talking about the collapsing of time and all that, like, that book is phenomenal. I'm actually rereading that book right now.
You said?
The Holographic Universe.
Oh, Universe.
Yeah.
Holographic.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
I love pretty much everything by Alan Watts. God, there's so many books, man. I love books. If I could do one thing all day, it'd be to read. And anyway, I'll throw that one out there for now.
Okay.
That's the first that came. Okay.
Love it. All right. I'm tempted not to say favorite food, but a food you enjoy greatly.
Well, I live in Italia, so obviously I'm big on pizza, pasta, all that. I wasn't big on pizza actually until I moved to Italy. I love those things. I really love things like smoothies and stuff. You know, I have a smoothie almost every
Yeah, me
day.
too.
I like that kind of stuff. I love getting the occasional croissant, you know, and things.
Oh,
Just getting a brioche and a cappuccino. You know, I like to do
oh
that every
yeah.
once in a while. Yeah, so I love food in general. I'm kind of a big foodie, so yeah.
Love it. Best business advice. Go.
Best business
And
advice,
it's a rapid fire round. So
trust yourself, trust yourself, trust yourself. You do know, and no one else has your answers but you do. Yeah, and
mm,
other people can remind you, but
what
they don't
is,
have your answers.
yep, nailed it.
Yeah.
What's your spirit animal?
Supposedly an owl.
Oh, good
And
one.
I'm not going to tell the
That's
story because
good.
it's rapid fire, but there's an amazing story behind that I'll tell you
Yes.
offline at another time.
Okay, please do. Um, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Ooh, one superpower. Oh gosh. I would want to um, like instantaneous travel, like to be able to be wherever I wanted to be, whatever I wanted to be, you
Teleport.
know, kind of just teleport. Thank you. I was like, what's that word? Grazie. Perfetto. Teleport.
Awesome. And if you had one billboard for the world to see, and this was your last piece of content, what would that billboard read?
Ooh. Trust.
Hmm, nailed it. Three things you're most grateful for.
Oh, my daughter, Gaia Ray, and the fact that she's healthy and bright and yeah, fabulous. I am grateful to get to do what I want, where I want, with who I want, when I want. I have so much gratitude around
Mm-hmm.
that. And I have so much gratitude for all the people in my life who I love dearly and who love me. And to have that kind of support is just, and to know that I can give it is just really a blessing. Yeah.
Amazing. You crushed that rapid fire round, Courtney. Now,
I
do
don't
you
know
have
about the rapid
any,
fire.
maybe not the rapid part, but definitely the
Yeah,
fire.
exactly. Sorry.
Okay. I want to give you a chance. Just any final thoughts before I ask you the last question that you want to share with the happy hustlers?
Final thoughts is just thank you so much and thank everyone who's listening. Like the fact that you showed up like this is such testament. I mean, if you've listened to this whole thing, and my daughter the other day was telling me that a 3-minute video is long, and I was like, whoa, 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 back up, you know, like, if you are living in this age and you have listened this long, I just want to take my hat off and say thank you, thank you, thank you from the top, bottom, and middle of my heart, because the fact that you've decided to show up for yourself and show up for this world and in the ways that you can is already phenomenal and remarkable. So, and that's extended obviously most as well to you for creating this space for us. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. I love it. Now, final question, Courtney. What does happy
Mhm.
hustling mean to you?
Okay. Well, happiness for me, happy is connected. It's about being connected. And hustle for me is smart action. So action on its own doesn't really make a lot of sense. But when your action is connected to is that connection piece, like when there's that faith piece, that trust piece, and that listening to yourself, that is the ultimate, like that is the ultimate hustle. Like that's the ultimate happy hustle, is just to do what you love, like tune into it, figure it out, take smart action in that direction, just keep going. I promise you, I promise you will be there. You already are there, you know, whole space-time
Nailed
continuum
it.
thing.
Loved it. Connected smart action. That's beautiful.
Mm.
Awesome, Courtney. Thank you again. Thanks everyone for
Carrie, thank
watching
you.
and listening. Peace and love, guys. We are out. Thanks so much, guys, for watching and listening to this episode of the Happy Hustle Podcast. It truly means the world to me. And if you enjoyed it, please share with a friend, someone else who could use this message of confidence and clarity and trust in your intuition and getting more of what you want and less of what you don't. And again, a big shout out to this episode's sponsor, Nootopia, who is making the best nootropics in the game. You can go to nootopia.com/happy hustle to get the hookup. I love you. I'm out now. Go out there and happy hustle a life